Weddings are supposed to be about love, trust, and the promise of forever. But what happens when love is built on secrets and lies? In this story, a night meant to symbolize the start of a new night together turns into betrayal and ruin. Set in a quiet upscale neighborhood, this tragic tale unfolds behind the walls of what should have been a perfect wedding, where joy masks the dark secret waiting to be revealed. This is the story of Daniel, Sophia, and Emily, whose lives are about to be changed based on the decision they've made. This story centers on Daniel, the loving and devoted groom, Sophia, the beautiful bride, and Emily, Sophia's chief bridesmaid. Three lives bound by fate and friendship, yet beneath the surface of their close-knit bond lies a hidden truth. Sophia and Emily share a connection far deeper than anyone knows. A connection that threatens to unravel everything on this fateful night. As Sophia stands by the altar, she is torn between the life she's about to live and the secret life she has with Emily. But to understand the true depth of this story, we must go back. Back to a time before the engagement, before the wedding preparations, and to the moment when everything changed. Sophia and Emily had been inseparable ever since college. What started as a chance pairing during orientation blossomed into a deep and enduring friendship. They were there for each other through heartbreaks, triumphs, and everything in between. Emily was the one who stood by Sophia when her father passed, and Sophia was Emily's unwavering cheerleader when she landed her first job. But somewhere along the way, their bond evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. It began innocently enough, a lingering hug after a particularly emotional evening, stolen glances during late-night study sessions, and an unspoken understanding that words couldn't articulate. Both tried to dismiss the growing tension, chalking it up to the intensity of their friendship. The line was crossed one rainy evening. They had been out celebrating Sophia's promotion at work, and a few too many glasses of wine led them to Emily's apartment. Laughter filled the air as they reminisced about their college days, but when Sophia went to leave, Emily grabbed her hand. "You don't have to go," Emily had said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia hesitated but stayed. What followed was a kiss that changed everything, a kiss that was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, they faced the truth they had been avoiding. Theirs was not just friendship. Daniel came into Sophia's life like a whirlwind, charming, attentive, and full of grand romantic gestures. They met at a work function where he was a guest speaker, and Sophia was instantly drawn to his confidence and charisma. His sharp wit and ability to command a room impressed her, and his boyish grin sealed the deal. For Daniel, meeting Sophia was love at first sight. Her laughter was infectious, her intelligence captivating, and her kindness unmatched. He pursued her with a fervor that swept her off her feet. Flowers on random Tuesdays, surprise dates to her favorite restaurants, and long conversations about life and dreams made Sophia feel seen and cherished. But Daniel wasn't just courting Sophia. He was becoming a part of her world. When Sophia introduced Daniel to Emily, she had been nervous. Emily had always been her confidant, her closest ally. Would Daniel's presence change that? But Emily, ever the supportive friend, welcomed him with open arms. She smiled warmly and even teased Sophia about finally finding someone who could match her energy. At first, their dynamic seemed perfect. The three of them would hang out often, dinners, movie nights, and casual get-togethers. Daniel enjoyed Emily's quick wit and sharp humor, and Emily, in turn, appreciated Daniel's efforts to include her in their plans. Yet cracks began to form beneath the surface. Daniel was so enamored with Sophia that he missed the subtleties. He didn't notice the way Sophia's eyes lingered on Emily a little longer than necessary, or how Emily's playful touches on Sophia's arm felt just a tad too familiar. He laughed off their private jokes, chalking them up to years of friendship. He didn't catch the tension in the air during quiet moments when the three of them were together, nor did he see the flicker of unease that crossed Sophia's face when he kissed her in front of Emily. Sophia, meanwhile, felt trapped in an emotional tug-of-war. On one hand, she was swept up in Daniel's love, his unwavering devotion, and the future he promised them. On the other, she couldn't deny the depth of her connection with Emily, a bond that transcended labels and expectations. Emily, for her part, played along. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, encouraged Sophia to embrace her happiness, and kept her own feelings tightly locked away. But each interaction with Daniel was a reminder of what she couldn't openly have with Sophia, and it ate away at her resolve. Daniel, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface, was all in. He planned elaborate dates, talked about their future together, and introduced Sophia to his family, with pride. To him, their relationship was flawless, a love story for the ages. But the truth lingered in the unspoken moments. Sophia and Emily's connection remained a quiet undercurrent, one that Daniel, in his overwhelming adoration, never thought to question. Once Daniel proposed, Sophia threw herself into the wedding preparations with a fervor that surprised even her closest friends. Every detail, from the floral arrangements to the seating chart, became her mission. She meticulously planned every moment of the ceremony and reception, determined to create the perfect day, a celebration of her love for Daniel. To outsiders, it seemed like Sophia was the epitome of a glowing bride-to-be. Her excitement was infectious, her passion for the wedding undeniable. Daniel adored her even more for it, believing her dedication was proof of her commitment to their future together. But Emily saw through the facade. Sophia's enthusiasm wasn't the joy of a woman head over heels in love. It was the desperation of someone trying to silence the turmoil within. Each bridal fitting, cake tasting, and menu selection was a way to distract herself from the truth she couldn't admit. Her heart was still tethered to Emily. Emily watched as Sophia became consumed by the wedding planning. She watched her laugh too hard at vendor meetings, talk too fast about centerpiece designs, and deflect personal questions about her feelings with vague, cheerful responses. When they were alone, Sophia was different. The cracks in her perfect bride persona began to show. "I'm fine," Sophia would insist, brushing off Emily's concerns. "Just a lot to do, you know. Weddings are stressful." But Emily wasn't fooled. She saw the way Sophia's hands trembled when she talked about her vows, the way her voice faltered when discussing the honeymoon. She noticed how Sophia avoided eye contact whenever Daniel's name came up in their private conversations. One evening, after a particularly long day of wedding prep, Emily confronted her. "Sophia, stop," Emily said, her tone firmer than usual. "You're running yourself ragged. What are you really trying to do here?" Sophia froze, her smile faltering for a moment before she regained her composure. I want everything to be perfect. This is important to Daniel, to me." "To you?" Emily pressed, stepping closer. "Or are you just trying to bury what you're feeling? Because I see it, Sophia. You're not okay." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "Emily, please don't do this. Not now." Emily softened, her frustration giving way to concern. "I'm not trying to make this harder for you. I hate seeing you like this. Pretending." Sophia turned away, her shoulders slumping. "What choice do I have, Em? This is my life now. Daniel's a good man. He loves me. I need to move forward." Emily wanted to argue, to remind Sophia of their connection, but she didn't. Instead, she simply said, "You don't have to do it like this. You don't have to lose yourself." Sophia didn't respond. She stared out the window, her reflection blending with Emily's in the glass, a haunting image of two lives intertwined but heading in opposite directions. From that point on, Emily watched as Sophia's resolve hardened. She threw herself even deeper into the wedding, smiling through the doubts and fears that Emily knew still lingered. But no matter how convincing Sophia's performance was, Emily could see the cracks growing larger, the weight of her choices pulling her further apart. And as the wedding day drew nearer, Emily realized that no amount of wedding bells or vows could truly mask the storm brewing beneath the surface. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect backdrop for what was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. The venue was a sprawling garden estate, adorned with cascading flowers, twinkling lights, and a sea of pristine white chairs lined neatly in rows. Guests murmured in anticipation, their excitement palpable as the ceremony drew closer. Sophia sat in the bridal suite, staring at her reflection. She looked stunning in her lace gown, her makeup flawless, her hair a masterpiece of soft curls and delicate pins. Yet, as she gazed into the mirror, all she could see was the weight of her choices staring back at her. "Breathe," Emily said softly, stepping behind her. She adjusted Sophia's veil with steady hands, their eyes meeting in the mirror. Sophia gave a weak smile. "I'm fine." Emily tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You're beautiful," she said, her voice laced with something deeper, an unspoken message that only they could understand. Before Sophia could respond, a knock at the door signaled it was time. The bridal party began their procession, leaving Sophia and Emily alone for one last moment. "Good luck," Emily whispered, her hand brushing Sophia's briefly before she turned to leave. Sophia watched her go, her chest tightening. She closed her eyes, willing herself to focus on the day ahead. The music swelled as Sophia walked down the aisle, her arm linked with her father's. Guests stood, their faces lit with joy as they watched her approach Daniel, who stood at the altar, his expression a mix of awe and devotion. Sophia forced herself to smile, her steps measured, her heart pounding. When she reached Daniel, he took her hands, his eyes searching hers with unbridled love. "You're breathtaking," he murmured, his voice shaking slightly. Sophia nodded, unable to speak, afraid that if she did, her carefully constructed composure would crumble. The officiant began, speaking of love, trust, and commitment. As the words washed over them, Sophia felt the weight of Emily's gaze from her spot among the bridesmaids. She dared not look, afraid of what she might see. Then came the vows. Daniel went first, his voice strong but emotional. He spoke of how meeting Sophia had changed his life, how her kindness and strength had made him a better man. His words were earnest, heartfelt, and every bit the promise of forever. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Sophia felt the pressure mount as all eyes turned to her. Her hands trembled as she held her vow card, but when she opened her mouth, the words didn't come. Instead, she looked at Daniel, his hopeful expression, his unwavering love, and a wave of guilt and sorrow crashed over her. She hesitated, swallowing hard. "I promise to stand by you, to support you, and to cherish every moment we share. You're everything I could ever hope for." Her voice cracked, and she quickly looked down, pretending to adjust her veil. The guests smiled warmly, mistaking her struggle for emotion. But Emily saw through it all. She watched Sophia's hands tighten around the bouquet, the way her gaze flickered with unspoken fears. Emily clenched her jaw, her own emotions threatening to spill over, as the ceremony continued. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the applause was deafening. Daniel kissed Sophia, pulling her close, his love evident in every gesture. Sophia smiled for the cameras, laughed for the crowd, and held Daniel's hand as they walked back down the aisle. But deep down, she felt like a puppet in her own life, each step taking her further from the truth she couldn't escape. As they entered the reception, surrounded by well-wishers and laughter, Sophia caught Emily's eye from across the room. For a brief moment, the world around them disappeared, leaving only the ache of what might have been. Emily raised her glass in a silent toast, her expression unreadable. Sophia blinked, and the moment was gone, replaced by the clinking of glasses and the start of their first dance. And so the day carried on, a picture-perfect celebration masking the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The celebration had been nothing short of magical. The garden twinkled with fairy lights, the music had lingered in the air like a gentle embrace, and Daniel had beamed with pride every time he looked at his new wife. As the night wound down, the newlyweds retreated to their honeymoon suite, leaving behind the laughter and clinking glasses of their guests. The suite was a romantic sanctuary, a bed draped with rose petals, candles flickering softly on every surface, and a chilled bottle of champagne waiting in a silver bucket. Daniel loosened his tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt, his smile wide as he turned to Sophia, who stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights. "Can you believe it?" he asked, his voice warm with excitement. "We're finally here, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson." Sophia turned to him, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Yeah, we're here." Daniel stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You were incredible today. Beautiful, radiant, everything I dreamed of." She rested her hands lightly on his chest, but didn't meet his gaze. "Thank you," she murmured. Daniel tilted her chin up gently. "Hey, are you okay? You've been quiet since we left the reception." "I'm just tired," she said quickly, stepping out of his embrace. "It's been such a long day." "Of course," he said, though a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. "It has been a lot. But it's just us now." He reached for her again, his touch tender and full of anticipation. Sophia hesitated, pulling back slightly. "Daniel, I really need to rest. I'm exhausted." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. Daniel's hands dropped to his sides and his smile faltered. "Oh," he said, trying to mask his frustration. "Yeah, of course, I understand." "I'm sorry," she added, her voice softer, almost pleading. "It's not that I don't want to. I just need to sleep tonight. Please." Daniel nodded, forcing a small smile. "It's okay, Sophia, I get it. You've been amazing all day. You deserve to rest." He turned away, busying himself with pouring a glass of champagne, but his movements were stiff, his jaw tight. Sophia watched him for a moment, guilt gnawing at her insides. She wanted to say something, to explain the turmoil in her heart, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she slipped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection. The makeup was still flawless, the veil perfect, an image of a bride who had everything. But the woman staring back at her felt like a stranger. Meanwhile, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, sipping his champagne in silence. He told himself not to take it personally. Sophia had been under immense pressure, and she deserved patience and understanding. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts, poking at his pride and stirring an unease he couldn't quite shake. He set the glass down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. "Tomorrow," he muttered to himself. "It's just the first night. Things will be better tomorrow." But as he closed his eyes, the ache of rejection lingered, a faint crack in the foundation of what should have been the happiest moment of his life. The suite was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the air conditioner. Daniel had drifted off into a light sleep, still fully dressed, lying atop the bed covers. Beside him, the space where Sophia should have been lay empty, her absence unnoticed in his groggy state. Sophia had waited until his breathing evened out, a soft rhythm that signaled he was asleep. She slipped out of the bed quietly, careful not to make a sound as she retrieved her phone and tiptoed toward the door. Her heart thudded in her chest, the sound roaring in her ears. Once in the hallway, she released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her bare feet padded softly against the plush carpet as she made her way to the room 2 doors down. She knocked once, a soft tap that was immediately answered by Emily, who pulled her inside without a word. Inside, the tension between them exploded into a desperate embrace. Emily's fingers tangled in Sophia's hair as their lips met, an unspoken connection reigniting in the intimacy of the dimly lit room. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't stay in there," Sophia replied, her voice trembling. "I needed to be with you." At around 2 a.m. Daniel stirred. The cool emptiness beside him immediately roused him fully. He sat up, blinking in confusion as he looked around the room. "Sophia?" he called softly, his voice laced with sleep. The suite was quiet, eerily so. He rubbed his eyes, his gaze falling on the empty glass of champagne she'd left on the bedside table. His stomach churned as he swung his legs off the bed, his bare feet sinking into the carpet. As he rose, a faint glow caught his attention. It came from a door 2 rooms down, the light seeping through a crack where it hadn't been fully shut. Daniel froze, staring at the light. He knew that room. It was Emily's. His first thought was worry. Maybe Sophia was overwhelmed by the wedding, by the enormity of what their union represented, and needed someone to talk to. He told himself that it made sense. Sophia and Emily were close, like sisters, but a flicker of doubt wormed its way into his mind. Why hadn't Sophia woken him? Why had she snuck out without a word? Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair, inhaling deeply to steady himself. He stepped out into the hallway, his footsteps slow and deliberate as he approached Emily's door. As he neared, muffled voices reached his ears. He paused just outside, straining to hear, but the words were indistinct. His hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. A sick feeling coiled in his stomach, a mix of dread and curiosity urging him forward. When he finally pushed the door open, the soft glow of the bedside lamp illuminated a scene that shattered his world. Sophia and Emily were entangled on the bed, their faces inches apart, their emotions unmistakable in the intimacy of their embrace. They froze at the sound of the door, their expressions shifting from blissful to sheer panic. "Daniel!" Sophia gasped, scrambling away from Emily, her face pale. Daniel stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his mind reeling from the betrayal unfolding before him. His fists clenched at his sides as he struggled to process what he was seeing. Is this what's been going on?" His voice cracked, a mixture of anger, confusion, and devastation pouring out with each word. Sophia stepped forward, her hands outstretched as if to calm him. "Daniel, please, I can explain." But he backed away, shaking his head. "Explain? Explain what, Sophia? That my wife, on our wedding night, is here with her bridesmaid instead of me?" Emily rose from the bed, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Daniel, this isn't something you'd understand." "Understand?"
Daniel barked, his voice rising. He pointed at both of them, his face twisted in anguish. "You've both been lying to me. How long has this been going on?" The garden, once serene and fragrant with blooming flowers, now felt suffocating under the weight of rage and heartbreak. Daniel stood at the center, his fists clenched, his face a mask of fury. Sophia and Emily, side by side, tried to maintain their composure, but the tremble in their postures betrayed their fear. "Did you ever love me, Sophia?" Daniel demanded, his voice cracking under the strain of betrayal. His eyes darted between his wife and her chief bridesmaid, as if searching for a shred of honesty amidst the lies. "Of course I loved you," Sophia whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But it's complicated." "Complicated?" Daniel shouted, his voice echoing through the empty garden. "You vowed to spend your life with me, and on the same night you—" He pointed an accusing finger at Emily. "With her?" Emily stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Daniel, this isn't just about you. Sophia deserves to be happy, and maybe—" "Don't you dare lecture me on happiness!" Daniel roared, his voice thunderous. "You've taken everything from me." The confrontation grew more volatile. Words flew like daggers, each sharper than the last. Lucas, one of Daniel's friends, who had been woken up by a noise from the room opposite his, had hovered in the shadows, his heart pounding as the scene spiraled out of control. He wanted to intervene, to de-escalate the situation, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. As Sophia tried to explain herself, Daniel's rage reached its breaking point. His breathing grew ragged, his chest heaving as raw emotion overwhelmed him. In a blur of motion, he grabbed a nearby decorative sculpture, a heavy, ornate piece of wrought iron. "Daniel, no!" Lucas shouted, stepping forward at last. But it was too late. In his fit of rage, Daniel swung the sculpture with terrifying force. Emily, standing protectively in front of Sophia, bore the brunt of the blow. She crumpled to the ground, her body lifeless and still. The world seemed to pause, the weight of what had just occurred settling over the garden like a suffocating fog. Sophia screamed, dropping to her knees beside Emily, shaking her and begging her to wake up. Daniel froze, the blood-stained sculpture slipping from his trembling hands. His fury drained away, replaced by a look of horror as he stared at what he had done. "Oh God," he whispered, backing away. "What have I done?" Lucas, one of the groom's men, rushed to Emily's side, checking for a pulse, but his grim expression told Sophia all she needed to know. "Call an ambulance," Lucas said, his voice strained. But they all knew it was too late. The garden fell into a haunting silence, broken only by Sophia's anguished sobs. Daniel staggered back, his face pale and his hands shaking uncontrollably. The enormity of his actions crushed him, the realization that he had crossed an irreversible line. Police sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Lucas glanced at Daniel, his expression a mix of pity and condemnation. "You need to stay here," he said quietly. "You need to face what you've done." Daniel nodded numbly, his gaze fixed on Emily's lifeless form. Sophia looked up at him, her tear-streaked face a mask of despair. "You've destroyed everything," she said, her voice barely audible. The sirens grew louder, the flashing lights casting an eerie glow over the tragic scene. As the officers approached, Daniel raised his hands in surrender, his once joyful life now reduced to ruins.
The once lively hotel was now a crime scene, its corridors buzzing with police officers and detectives. Daniel sat in a cold interrogation room, his hands cuffed and his face blank with shock. His wedding day, meant to mark a new beginning, had ended in devastation. Sophia, inconsolable, was questioned separately. Her tears flowed freely as she recounted the events leading up to the murder, her voice shaking with grief and remorse. In the end, Daniel was charged with second-degree murder. The court proceedings that followed were a blur of testimonies, evidence, and tears. Lucas, still haunted by his role in the tragedy, attended every hearing, grappling with his own sense of accountability. Sophia's betrayal and Emily's death became tabloid fodder, the scandal captivating the public's morbid curiosity. But for those involved, the reality was far from sensational. It was a nightmare they would carry forever. As Daniel was led away to begin his sentence, Lucas stood outside the courthouse, staring at the grey skies above. He whispered to himself, "Weddings may bring out secrets, but some secrets destroy everything." And with that, the curtain fell on a story of love, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of a single moment of passion. Do well to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more chilling crime tales, and we'll see you in our next video.